Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Night's Last Call. My name is Derek Melinda, welcoming you back to Cleveland, to back home. We are back in the office. We are back in the studios. We're back home, back where we belong. Welcome, everybody. Frosty says they are supposed to be sleeping and that we are a bad influence on them. I apologize, Frosty. Thank you. Frostjack, how is it going? It's going well. I've been back now for a few days. Got back into work today, or yesterday, I should say. It's been pretty busy. Ended up being a guest on RFC the last 2 days, which, was not expecting on that. So that was kind of fun. And yeah, overall, it's been good. It's been good. Hopefully everybody else is doing really well. Oh, sec here. I'm just in my chair a little bit. There we go. Hopefully everybody is doing really well. And KC, sup, KC. Good evening to you as well, London Matthews. I don't know how many people we're going to get tonight. These book streams have been pretty quiet, pretty slow. Roll for Combat is here. Agent of Chaos, welcome. Indeed you are. So, yeah, I've been a guest on the RFC stream the last couple of days. Couple interesting things going on out there. If you want to check out what's going on in the wider world of role-playing games, and some of the kind of latest, juiciest, gossipy news, check out Roll for Combat's YouTube channel. You'll see me there on the last 2 days. But as for tonight, I thought we would just focus on the wonderful, blissful past of my RPG collection as we kind of continue going through this interesting look. It's an interesting look for me. Hopefully it's an interesting look for you as well at not only, my RPG collection and how that has shaped me, but also maybe some interesting new RPGs for you as well, and things that you had not considered. yeah, no, that's all. That's all sounds pretty good. All right. Yeah, thanks, Roman. Remember to click the like button. Yeah, all that stuff. You know, if you like the channel, subscribe, like, ring the bell so you get notified whenever we go live. We do go live Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 p.m., but sometimes we go live bonus streams on Mondays or Fridays or Sundays. Almost never Wednesdays or Fridays, but I'm sorry, Wednesdays or Saturdays, but those are the days. And yeah, you know, so pretty cool stuff there. And of course, if you really like us and you want to throw some support our way, we do have a link in the description below to our Stream Elements tip goal, where you can go ahead and throw us some cash, donations like PBS. We are viewer funded. We don't get quite enough views and all that stuff on YouTube to really make this anything worth anything. It is only through the largesse and the incredible support of our patrons and our donations that we are able to keep this channel going and be able to invest the kind of money that we've been able to invest in it to try to do some cool stuff and give away some cool prizes and all that other stuff, which, you know, you're interested in being part of our community. We also have a link below to our Patreon, patreon.com/Knights of Last Call. All right, I'm gonna work my way into it. I feel rusty, like I haven't been on in a while. So hopefully everybody's doing well. I figure I'll wait till we get to at least about 20 people in the chat, then I'll start doing stuff. GM Scott is here saying, "Hey, what's up, everybody?" Hello, GM Scott. Jackal Torn Moons, what is up? George Harris, hello, Knights. Did I get my land legs back yet? Yes, I did. Actually, for anyone who's ever been on a cruise, a phenomenon that I certainly experienced is I will get land sickness. In other words, I'll be on the cruise fine, and then I'll come back home, and I'll be on land for a day or two, and that's when I'll start to feel this weird sort of sickness, almost like I'm dizzy. And it's because my body had gotten used to being on the slight roll of the ship. And it's only after the fact that I kind of get I don't get sick on the ship. I just get sick after I get off and I'm on land. It's really funny. Vocal warm-up. Sing the ranks F through S. F, 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 F. D, 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 D. C, 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 C. B, 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 B. A, S. All right. There we go. Well, we got 20 people there, so hopefully that was fantastic. Let's hop into it, shall we? All right. We'll go hop over to the book shot. There we go. And again, remember, you know, no especially evocative stream goals tonight, but if there is something that I talk about and you want a little bit more detail, the way this goes is I'm going to pull a book out of my collection. We'll talk about it for about 2 minutes, and if somebody wants to tip or throw some extra money our way or super chat or whatever, what have you, and they're interested in a game, especially one that we've already discussed or in the process of discussing, I will go ahead and spend an extra couple of minutes kind of digging into that game or answering your question. I will try to answer your questions, but generally speaking, we try to keep this kind of moving so that we can, you know, get through this at a reasonable pace. All right. So let us go ahead and get started. Why not? All right, this is the Avatar Legends role-playing game made by Magpie, which just came out last year after the most successful Kickstarter of RPG Kickstarter, I should say, in Kickstarter history. This is a Powered by the Apocalypse game and represents the most current version of Magpie's evolution of Powered by the Apocalypse. It features a fascinating look through 4 or 5 different eras of the Avatar world, 2 of which we've seen on the television, and 3 of which have been kind of covered in some of the comic books, representing everything from a more pastoral area to the more modern era of like Republic City. And of course, it's an interesting book because it really does start off with a pretty good sized chunk of lore and information, and it's mostly background filler material. This is a very thick book for a PBTA game. And a big part of the reason for that is because of all of this background lore and information. But eventually we get into, you know, how do these things work? And of course it is an Avatar. It is a Powered by the Apocalypse game. And that means playbooks, and that means moves. A couple of interesting things that really stood out about Avatar as a Powered by the Apocalypse game. Number one is, I think it's brilliant, but one of the best decisions they made in this game was they didn't make a bunch of crazy bending moves. Instead, as kind of following the pattern set by Root, you basically get two different moves to represent you trying to do something. It's something that you're skilled at or trained at, and something where you're just kind of trusting your natural instinct and your gut, you know, your luck. And this game represents this very beautifully with two moves, which are rely on your skills and training and push your luck. And I really like this dichotomy. I think it's a really interesting way to represent the differences between doing something that you're skilled at and doing something that you are not skilled at. So I really do appreciate this. It's a very simple way of reflecting the difference between these two approaches. And I think they did a good job and a fun job with this. So I thought that was really, really cool. And then the second thing, which is a little bit more controversial, there's a lot of stuff in this book, but is most Powered by the Apocalypse games have nothing resembling a combat section. This version of Powered by the Apocalypse does. In Avatar, your bender or martial artist will learn some techniques which apply during a specific combat exchange move, which kind of resembles something close to combat. Some people don't like it. Some people do like it. I think a lot of people are kind of still curious as to how well it actually works out. This game has gotten dangerously close to getting played at my table, and I'd love to play it some, you know, on with the patrons. And I know there's an Avatar game that has started on our Patreon, so I don't want to make like too many rash decisions yet. I don't want to overhype it, and I don't want to underhype it. My thought process is here. I really like a lot what they're doing with the game system. I think it's innovative, and I think it's interesting. I like the combination of fatigue plus conditions. It's probably a little bit overly complicated for a Powered by the Apocalypse game, but I don't necessarily know that that's a bad thing, because sometimes when I play PBTA games, the thing that I miss is some of the crunch. So maybe some of these techniques and moves will help satisfy that, and maybe would keep people interested in a PBTA game longer. But I'm not going to give it S tier, but I am going to give it A minus, with the potential for a tick up or tick down depending on how well, especially that combat exchange system, resolves in play. But Avatar Legends, we'll give it an A. Again, could be maybe an A minus, could be maybe A plus, but we'll reserve that judgment. So that is Avatar Legends from Magpie. Oh, Ben is here. Hey, Ben. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention to my chat. Ben is here. Just passing through, setting up for Versus D. I don't know when I'm going to get my Versus D book. I was intrigued enough by the game, and I thought the art was pretty enough, and I like a nice, thick, well-bound book. I did order the Against the Dark Master book, but we'll see. I don't know when it's going to be here. Bernardo, thinking GM Scott is not the creator of Easy D6. It's DM Scotty. Yes, that's pretty funny. It takes several weeks. Okay. All right. Good to know. All right. As alluded to earlier today, here is the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition, 2E, the forgotten child of the Dungeons & Dragons edition. Tome of Magic, which is a book, basically a splat book. It contains a bunch of new spells for the AD&D 2nd Edition game. Ooh. But it is most well known for introducing the idea of wild mages and the wild magic table, which is now kind of, I don't know, it seems like it's in every D&D game. And the idea that you are a wild mage, the power of your spells can vary from low to high, and if you get a surge, the power of your magic will be completely replaced by something on a random table. We did this earlier today, but we can do it again here. D100. Here's our D100. All right, we've got a 16 on the D100. So this particular spell, the caster polymorphs randomly. Woo! Crazy chaos, right? No, it's stupid. I hate wild magic. As for some of the spells in this book, some of them we would go on to sort of become well-known spells in the D&D lexicon, but most of these spells were fairly forgettable. If I'm not going to lie, this was a mediocre splat book. Most spell books are. That being said, Bernardo, am I the only one who thinks AD&D book covers are gorgeous and better than almost anything they print nowadays? I completely agree. I don't necessarily want to say that the new covers are bad. I don't think that they are, but there is just something evocative here that is very, very, very cool. It's probably that, it's nostalgia. But again, some of the modern stuff is very beautiful, but I do love some of the second edition art the most. And it might just be because this is the edition I grew up with. I started playing D&D right around 1990, 91, and second edition came out in 89. So anyways, Tome of Magic, it gets a C from me. All right. So the next one is a box set. It is Freemarket. This is by Jared Sorensen and Luke Crane, the same people behind such luminarily beautiful games such as Burning Wheel. Freemarket is probably the strangest RPG that you will ever experience, know, or play. The idea of Freemarket is that you are living in a post-scarcity world. You live on a space station in orbit around Saturn. People's minds can be downloaded into new bodies. You can print new bodies for yourself. You can kind of matter, replicate, and print kind of almost anything. There is no money. There is no death. There are no real consequences, except social ones. Yes, this is the game that sort of, if you're familiar with Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom by Cory Doctorow, if you're familiar with any of Ray Kurzweil's post-scarcity, post-singularity stuff, any sort of post-scarcity science fiction. If you've seen Black Mirror, and there's an episode called Nosedive that stars Bryce Dallas Howard as a girl where they try to get likes from people, and then the level of your social currency sort of depends on how much access you have. This is this game. Now, I have actually never played this game. That's why all the things are still in their cardboard punch-outs. But man, this game was just chock full of stuff. Character sheets, and every player gets their own deck of cards that resolves how you play the game. Now, what's the point of this game? Nobody knows. The point of this game is just to be like cool and live on a space station and do cool shit and just kind of make your own way. It really does not have a point or a purpose, and you either love that or you hate that. But that is Freemarket. I don't know how else to describe it. It's a very, very strange game. I will read it because we have 46 seconds left. This is the rule book, by the way. Welcome to the Donut. We are a society of functionally immortal, cybernetically modified, telepathic infovores. Our culture is centered on a reputation-based economy in which all basic needs, substance and shelter, are accounted for. If you wish to do more than just survive, if you wish to create, perform, build, or destroy, you must do it with the approval of your friends and the greater community at large. It's a very strange, weird game from the deep, dark, recessed minds of Luke Crane. I've heard that the game has some problems with its actual resolution mechanics, but it's very interesting. It's also apparently very hard to get a hold of. Bernardo was able to snatch an as-new market copy on eBay for $60-ish, becoming super rare. Yeah, Luke Crane doesn't do PDFs of his games. This came as a box set, so it was already pretty rare, and I don't think they did more than one printing of it. And I got to imagine why, because it's a very, very chock full box. Anyways, Freemarket. I have no idea what to grade this because I read it. It's a weird game. I just have no idea how it would actually play out. You have to hack your memories in order to, like, when you gain experience, you literally write down what happened on your character sheet, and you can only have like 3 or 4 long-term memories and like 5 short-term memories, and that kind of represents like what skills you get from sort of leveling up. And people can like hack your brain and replace your memories. It's kind of really strange. Yeah, I think normally I would say it's a C, but it's just interesting and just weird enough and just my vibe that I'm going to upgrade it to a B. All right. I think we already covered Monsterhearts, but this is Monsterhearts 2nd edition. Interestingly enough, so 1st edition, Avery Alder published under her original name, but in the 2nd edition, she published under her chosen name, which is pretty cool. This is functionally similar to 1st edition. Monsterhearts is a game where you play as monsters in high school. You play as teenagers who are vampires and werewolves and ghosts and ghouls and, you know, creatures and fae emissaries from the dark enchanted kingdoms of the fae. And it's a Powered by the Apocalypse game. You can see that by the conversation, the agenda. And it has some of the best writing about why we play role-playing games ever, outside of anything for, you know, the actual rules of the game. Bernardo, I am rating both editions separately, and I'll tell you why. Because I gave Monsterhearts an S, I'm going to give this one only an A. And I'll tell you why. Now, there's a couple of things that they put in here, which I do appreciate. There's a little bit more sensitivity written into this book. For example, there's a move called Turn Someone On. There's a whole section here about, well, what happens if the person you're turning on is asexual? But the main reason I don't like 2nd edition as much as I like 1st edition is in 1st edition, strings were a lot more powerful, and you could really use them to manipulate NPCs. And I really, really liked the way that strings worked as NPC manipulation much better than I did in 2nd edition. Now, I don't know why she changed it, but she did. Let's see exactly what the change was, if I can remember correctly. Yeah, so you can see here pulling strings and what happens when you spend a string on somebody. But the original rules gave you something that pulling strings on PCs did one thing, pulling strings on NPCs did something else. It made it a lot easier to manipulate NPCs, and I kind of liked that better. I felt it led to better play styles of the game. I'm not really sure why she changed that, but it is a minor change. But again, we talked about Monsterhearts already on an earlier episode. I'm not sure which one it was, but Monsterhearts 2 is still probably the game that you can get a hold of. It's still fantastic. It's still everything that the first game was. Now, obviously, you know, in retrospect, you know, nowadays with some of our modern tech, you know, PBTA tech, I'm like, oh, it'd be cool to see a Monsterhearts 3 with, you know, kind of updated concepts around conditions and stuff like that, like from Thirsty Sword Lesbians. But Avery Alder, who is the author of this book, was a contributing author in Thirsty Sword Lesbians. So in a sense, Thirsty Sword Lesbians is kind of like Monsterhearts 3. But anyways, Monsterhearts 2, still a very good game, but I only give it an A because I didn't like some of the rules changes that got made. All right, moving on. How's everybody doing? We doing good? I remember almost nothing about this book. This is Drow of the Underdark from 3rd edition D&D. I do not even know. This must have come out near the end of the game of 3rd edition. I think at that point in time, I was just buying books just to have them. I can actually tell by this font right here that this came out near the end of 3.5. The cover, as Ben was saying here, is very beautiful. They started doing this right at the end of 3rd edition, where it's kind of this overlay on a matte finish. It's really, really cool. Well, this explains the Drow. It's got all sorts of information about the Drow, their religion, their gods, their goddesses, their history, their folklore, and of course, it's 3rd edition. So here come the feats. Look at all the new feats. Wow, new feats. And of course, new spells. It wouldn't be without new spells. What about some new prestige classes? Of course. And new monsters. More prestige classes. More new monsters. Basically, like, oh, here's some new magical items. Basically, it's like every splat book that ever existed for 3rd edition. Just monsters, items, feats, spells. It's just like super mega splat. I don't find the Drow that particularly interesting, and I never really have. I mean, I like Dritz and all, but I never thought the Drow were particularly, like, cool. Like, they're fine, whatever. They're bad guys or whatever. But I don't know. I just never thought Drow or Dark Elves were even that cool. Drow the Underdark. Drow, D for Drow. D plus. It's well laid out, I guess, but it's just a classic example of just 3.5 splat full of, and very, very niche splat. That's, you know, I mean, I guess this is a great book if you're going to run a Drow campaign, but other than in the Underdark, D. All right. 4th edition Dungeon Master's Guide 2. So 4th edition had a really cool idea, which was they were going to release every year a player's handbook and a Dungeon Master's Guide. The new player's handbook would contain some new classes or some updates from old classes. It would not repeat all the rules. So player's handbook 2 and player's handbook 3 were not as long as player's handbook 1. But they were also going to do the same thing for Dungeon Masters. And they were going to create more advanced Dungeon Master guides as time went on, with more information about how to run the higher level game elements of the game. In fact, if you read Dungeon Master's Guide, the first one, it does seem like it is more focused on the beginning part of the game. Dungeon Master's Guide 2 tries to sort of give you more advice about the mid levels of the game, as well as just some absolutely fantastic advice on how to run D&D games. For starters, there is a whole section. I mean, this is how a Dungeon Master Guide should really honestly be done. First, it talks about group storytelling, and it talks about how to make decisions and why decisions should branch, and how you should view encounters as branching points. They talk about making arcs, your cast of characters. What are their motivations? What are their relationships? How to build a world. Talking about building a world cooperatively. Don't negate what people say. Introduce what the players are suggesting. This is all very, very forward, progressive thinking advice in the D&D space. And of course, all of this just got shot to shit because people didn't like 4th edition and people wanted to move on to 5th edition, and everybody just completely shit on this. How to integrate role playing into your games and how to make it a part of your integrate games. Things that we would expect to see in a PBTA game, right? Like vignettes, flashbacks, dream sequences, transitions, third-person teasers. This isn't a D&D game book giving you this advice. So, how to reward people for drama. I mean, and I'm just through the first chapter. They talk about how to build really, really cool encounters, how to use skill challenges, the encounter building rules to build compelling, narratively, cinematically interesting encounters, how to design better traps, skill challenges. They revised the skill challenge rules in this book from the first DMG. They learned a little bit better about how they work. They have a bunch of skill challenge examples, how to build custom monsters, a whole section of templates and monster themes, so you can build a monster and then just stick on one of these themes to turn it into a Demogorgon cultist, or build a monster using the core rules, stick on one of these themes, and you've turned it into a Feywild denizen, etc., 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 etc. And then information about adventuring at the Paragon tier. Dungeon Master's Guide 2 is a fantastic book. It is chock full of information, and I think it's worth buying the PDF today. We do have a drive-through RPG affiliate link in our description below, which you can use. And if this has been a couple days and you're watching this video on demand, hopefully one of our intrepid fans and viewers, maybe someone like George, has gone through and linked everything. We might have a link to this directly, but I think it's worth picking up, and I think it is worth a read. I think it has a lot of great advice, and I'm going to give it a solid A+. I think it is very, very good. It is a fantastic resource for Dungeon Masters, especially if you're used to just, I play adventure paths and I just do whatever the book tells me to do, which is nothing wrong with that. That's how most people start. But this has got information about, you know, how to deal with that. Let's see. Magic Missile not hitting automatically just messed people up. It sure did. It sure did. All right. Well, we're here. It's right on top, so we might as well do it. All right. Dungeon World, the game that launched 1,000 games. Apocalypse World may be what Powered by the Apocalypse is named after, but I'm pretty convinced that Dungeon World, and this was the kind of the, I think the like the beta release. This is the more common release that most people are familiar with. Dungeon World is the game that I think most people were influenced by and probably certainly put PBTA into the most mainstream. I mean, Apocalypse World's great and all, but let's just face it. I mean, not many people are interested in playing in post-apocalyptic grunge, right? Dungeon World basically took the concepts of Powered by the Apocalypse and applied them to D&D, for better and for worse. Dungeon World is the game that a lot of people have played for Powered by the Apocalypse, and I don't actually think it is a great Powered by the Apocalypse game. I think it is a great game, but I don't think it is a great Powered by the Apocalypse game because it tries to incorporate too many elements from D&D, notably things like hit points and damage rolls, which make certain elements of Powered by the Apocalypse really, really wonky. That being said, it is a fantastic transition for people who are willing to actually learn what it means to run a more narrative style game and to actually run a game based off of GM agendas and principles that may be different from what you're typically used to in a, say, Fantasy 20 game. It's a great way to sort of step your players from D20 into a more narrative game because there's a lot of familiar terms and, you know, we're not going to go straight to conditions and no, we'll have this intermediary step of hit points, but at the same time, it's still Powered by the Apocalypse. They're rolling 2d6. They're getting, you know, hits, strong hits, weak hits, misses. They're rolling all the dice. I'm not rolling any dice. I'm making GM moves, right? It's very much in the spirit of PBTA, but it's not 100% there. I have played this probably more than any PBTA game in existence. I've run a lot of Dungeon World at Gen Con. I've played a lot of Dungeon World at Gen Con. It's easily the one that kind of the most common one that would get played at indie games on demand. I'm a big fan of it. Now I like some of the more modern tech. A lot of the stuff that Magpie has done really makes me look at this and say, boy, I wish we could redo this game. But this game for me is seminal. It is a titan in its space. And while it has gotten a little long in the tooth, it was very instrumental for me, and I think for a lot of people, in really pushing outside of not just D20, because, you know, there were other games, like Earth Dawn isn't D20, but it's still that kind of traditional trad role-playing game where, you know, you have a character sheet with stats and you have dice that you roll and you're trying to get a DC. This game shook me, you know, out of that and kind of introduced me to a wider world of games. So I'm going to give it an S, just because of how important it has been to the gaming hobby and industry, but also to me personally. So Dungeon World. Dungeon World. All right. Sean says, if you approach it as a D&D alternative instead of a PBTA game, it really shines. Yeah, I mean, I think, to be fair, though, Sean, I think a lot of the problems that people do have when they play the Dungeon World is, as players and as game masters, is they play it too much like D&D. And I think that those touchstone elements of D&D are what make people fall into those old patterns. And what am I, like, the best example I can give is people roll the dice too many times. And they're used to D&D where you roll the dice for everything. And if you just roll the dice for everything in Powered by the Apocalypse, you are just going to quickly get, you're going to run out of ideas to be, you know, come up with. on 7, 8, 9s. The players are going to feel like it's really strange that like nothing is happening. Like you're going to feel like you're stuck spinning in circles. It's a very, and people go, I don't know what to do. Like they keep searching. I keep rolling the dice and then it's a 6-. So I guess monsters happen. And now we're in another fight and they hack and slash and then they hack and slash and then they hack and slash and then they hack and slash. And it's like, no, you cannot run this like a D20 game or it will fail. Dungeon World.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Dungeon World.
Satan's game.
All right. What else we got? Mutants and Masterminds, Warriors and Warlocks supplement. This was introducing the idea that the Mutants and Masterminds system, and this is, by the way, Mutants and Masterminds 2nd edition, you could use this for not just superheroes, you could use this for your D&D game, in particular, your kind of sword and sorcery pulp era game, because the rules, we got a nice quote here from Robert E. Howard. The rules, hey, Ben, thank you.
Ben, tip $20. Have skulls to crush and lungs to pierce. Have a great stream. Welcome back.
Thank you, Ben, for the tip. Appreciate you. Thank you for the welcome back. And have fun playing against the Dark Master. I, of course, am very curious to hear how those sessions go because, well, it's a very deadly, interesting game. And I know that your players are kind of in a precarious spot. So it'll be interesting to hear and learn what happens to them. I look forward to reading it. Thanks, Ben. Enjoy your game. Yeah, there's not much to say about this book. It basically takes the ideas of Mutants and Masterminds 2nd edition and allows you to sort of, you could do all of this without this book. But it just gives you a lot of like templates. Like if you want to make a halfling in using the Mutants and Masterminds rule set, you know, what do? Okay, well, you give the creature +2 dexterity, you give them 4 ranks in diplomacy, and you give them shrinking 4, continuous, permanent, innate, aka they're small. Whereas if you're an elf, you give them dexterity +2, wisdom +2, charisma +2, 4 ranks in diplomacy, 4 ranks in arcane lore, 4 ranks in notice, 4 ranks in search, 4 ranks in survival, attack focus ranged, attractive, cat's feet, eagle eyes, low light vision, precise shot, track. You give them the features power, 1, to give them longevity of life, and super movement, 2, sure-footed and trackless. So being an elf is worth 23 points. Being a halfling is worth 8. And by the way, that's kind of a great example in Mutants and Masterminds. A typical Mutants and Masterminds character might get 100 to 150 points to make your character with at the start of the game. 150. It's pretty common. To gain super long life, where I live hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, if not immortal functionally, costs 1 point. Because the game is like, yeah, but that might be really, really powerful, right? And if this was like a real world thing, it would be really, really powerful, and that would be very expensive. But in the context of a role-playing game, that almost doesn't matter. And so we're not going to make it cost, you know, oh my God, that is so super powerful. No, it just costs a point. Yeah, Mutants and Masterminds is like, if you like 3rd edition and you like D20, but you didn't want to play GURPS and you don't want to play Champions because you just don't want to learn a different system, but you love the idea of all this point buy and all this accounting, Mutants and Masterminds is a game for you. B. I give that book a B. Warriors and Warlocks for Mutants and Masterminds 2nd edition gets a B for me. It was a fun book. I really wanted to play like a Conan style game with it, but we never really got a chance to do it. I think 4th edition came out, and I think that distracted us. Tome of Annihilation. I do not know why they keep remaking this adventure. I mean, the first adventure was a troll, right? I mean, it was Gary Gygax, who was sick of hearing players say, oh, my character is so powerful, I could beat any challenge in the game. And so he made this tournament module, Tome of Annihilation, so that people would have to use their minds, they'd have to be smart and clever, and they couldn't just brute force their way through the game. And that is the Tome of Annihilation. It's a classic. I'm not saying it's good. It just does what it does. I don't think it's an actually well-designed dungeon. I'm just saying it's a death trap dungeon designed to just be more of like a puzzle and a, you know, kind of a funny way to taunt players for, you know, thinking that they could be so powerful that nothing could kill them. But now, for some odd reason, and we'll get to this in a second, there have been several attempts to turn it into a campaign setting. And that's just dumb. I don't know how else to say this. This book in particular turned it somehow into a exploration of Chult, which is the sort of jungly South American area of Forgotten Realms. I don't know what the hell is going on with this. What the Tome of Annihilation. Tomb of Annihilation. Tomb of Annihilation is not a hex crawl through the jungle. So yeah. I only read through part of this book because I was like, what the hell is going on with this stupid thing? 5th edition adventures are also just really, really, really weird. Like, it's just like endless text, just never ending text. It's like, oh my God, look at this. It's like just blocks and look, there's no word, there's no numbers on this book. It's the page. It's just all text. Who's reading this? Let alone who's reading this in the middle of a like, I don't know if you remember. I don't think I have it over here. Do you remember those adventures I was showing? Expedition to Castle Ravenloft from 3rd edition, the one that had the 2-page spread. Hold on a second, I'm gonna get it. All right, maybe I'm not. Anyways, point is, I really do need to organize these things, huh? Shit, there's so much shit. All right. Anyways, point is, this is horrible. It's just badly, you know, laid out, and I think the whole idea of turning this into a campaign setting is stupid and silly. Zach says, I'm running this right now, and I think it's great. Well, Zach, I mean, listen, I appreciate that you are enjoying the game, but man, also, fundamentally, this is an adventure for characters of levels 1 to 11. That's half the game. If you go to 20, that's not an adventure. That's a campaign. Okay? Anyways, Tomb of Annihilation, I give an F2. I just don't see why this should ever be a campaign setting. To that end, return to the tomb. Now, by the way, this is honestly, I think, why this is why I get these two words confused. See, this was a special thing for 2nd edition called the Tomes series, the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Tome series, and this was Return to the Tomb of Horrors. So this was 2nd edition's attempt to rebuild this dungeon. I don't think I have everything in here. I mean, I have enough here. Return to the Tomb of Horrors. And like before, this is just an attempt to basically turn, although it does have a foreword by Gary Gygax. It's pretty cool. Let's see what he says here. It was long ago when the Tomb of Horrors first made its appearance. Before I put it into manuscript form for publication, I carried the scenario around with me in my briefcase so as to be ready for those fans who boasted of having so mighty a PC as able to best any challenge offered by the AD&D game. After an hour or so of time spent within the weird labyrinth of Acerak's final resting place, the players whose characters were now survivors typically remembered that they suddenly had very pressing engagements elsewhere. Clutching their precious character sheets, they fled the table. Those who had already lost their vaunted PCs had previously departed, muttering darkly about, quote, impossible death traps. Had I been mean and cruel, I would have required participants to hand over their character sheets upon the demise of such a prized PC, torn them up, and then smiled wickedly as I asked for the name and address of their DM so as to pass on the news of this sad loss. But alas, I am very kind at heart. So yeah, but it's the same problem with the other one. It really, it's turning the whole thing into a campaign. And by the way, awesome, Gary Gygax. By Bruce Cordell, one of my favorite adventure designers, game designers of all of time. I love this second edition style of art. This was very popular, like 90, like post Skills and Powers era, post Black Border books. This sort of gray hashing style of art. I love it. Just very, very evocative. But that being said, yeah, also, you know, they use text blocks and there's tables and there's information. It probably honestly is ultimately probably a bit better, but it does suffer from the same problem. I'm not going to pretend this is like super better. I'm going to give it an F, but like, at least it's done. But I don't know, F plus, is that even, nobody even cares, but D minus, I guess, if you want to be really fair. But again, it's, I just think it's a flawed approach. Just let the Tomb of Horrors be the Tomb of Horrors. All right. This is empty. Okay. All right, here we go. Here is an adventure for 3rd edition D&D made by Necromancer Games. Old school, 3rd edition rules. Old school feel. This is the Hall of the Rainbow Mage. And this is a really cool adventure. I've run the first part of this adventure several times, but I've never actually run through all of this. This was, you know, part of the awesomeness of original 3rd edition is that companies like Necromancer Games came out and produced their own take on the adventures. This is an adventure. It's for 4 to 6 characters from level 7 to 9. So you can see here, it is an actual adventure. It's not a campaign. It's designed to only last you a couple of levels. You're playing a campaign. Your characters are, you know, starting to get to level 5 or 6. You start dropping in some clues and hints about the famous Hall of the Rainbow Mage. Maybe your players go there. Maybe they don't. But if they do go there, cool. Now you've got information about this adventure. And what is this adventure primarily? It's a site. It's a location. There is the infamous mansion, the Hall of the Rainbow Mage, or I should say the Tower of the Rainbow Mage. And then, I don't know, do we have maps in this book? Probably. You get a series of dungeons that allow you to explore said, maybe not. All right, well, there's maps in here somewhere. I just don't know where they are. I'm sure there's a table of contents. Let's see. No, there is no table of contents. Okay, well, it gets a point off from that. Anyways, point is, you get random, you know, this is the way that you run an adventure. Now, apparently this adventure is very badly designed because it does not have maps, or it does not have an index. So, what the hell? Did I rip something out of this book? Holy shit. Oh, okay. They are all the way at the end of the book. All right. That was so stupid. Anyways, so, you know, you get the initial Hall of the Rainbow Mage. There's a little town that, you know, is kind of tied into the hook of the game. And then the Temple of Horgrim. And boom, that's it. You're done. You explore it for a few levels. That took me entirely too long to find those maps, though. And there's no table of contents. So, sorry, Hall of Rainbow Mage. You only get a C. But it's pretty cool. And, like, Necromancer Games made some cool, fun adventures. Man, that was tilting. More adventures. Hoard of the Dragon Queen. Another 5th adventure. This, I think, was the first adventure that came out for 5th edition. This is really weird. This has this problem. Hey, Enthio.
Enthio tipped $5. Would love to see your fav AD&D 2 ebook.
Oh, my favorite, eh? That is a great question. My favorite 2E book. All right, we'll get back to the Hoard of the Dragon Queen. All right, I think I know what it is. All right, but let's finish up with Hoard of the Dragon Queen. I understand that these adventures got kind of shit on a little bit. The binding on this thing is horrible. I've never even played this game. I've never played this. Look at this. And look at this. Look at this binding coming apart. Look at that. How horrible is that? Never even used this book. Horrible. Now, I got to admit, you know, there's already improvements here over the Pathfinder 2. You know, like there's random encounter tables and all this other stuff. But this starts with already a problematic encounter. I'm sure so many people are familiar with this. But there's a town and it's being attacked by a dragon, like a powerful dragon. And it's like, and of course you run into the town. It's like, no, we don't. We're very low level. Like, why would we do this? It's structured like a sandbox, but it requires that players do very specific things in order to pass through it. It has some very Deus Ex Machina moments in it. And, you know, I mean, and most of these quote unquote dungeons are exceptionally linear. They lead to what is obviously like the final battle. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff that they jammed into these quote unquote adventures. They really are more like mini campaigns. I get that they're not as linear as like what people really want out of an adventure these days, which is part of the reason why I think people like Pathfinder 2 adventures better, actually, is because they are more linear. This is more of just like, here's a bunch of ideas. We kind of shoved them into a book with not a lot of like editing or thought process. Now that may be more your style, but it's also not necessarily a good style either. So I'm not trying to say like these adventures are great and Pathfinder 2 adventures suck. I'm just saying I think they both kind of suck. I give this a D. I didn't think it was really very good or compelling. That being said, I really do like the 5th edition books, how they have this kind of glossy art part, and then it turns into this like nice matte finish here on the edges. I do like that a lot. That's nice. Book feel is important. Zach says, if Tome of Annihilation is an F, Hoard of the Dragon Queen is like a K. Okay, I'll downgrade it to F, Zach. It's fine. I've heard enough bad things about it, Zach, that I will downgrade it. Ooh. This, to my knowledge, was the first official book that came out for 3rd edition D&D after the Monster Manual, Player's Handbook, and Dungeon Master's Guide. This is the Hero Builder's Guidebook, which is very thin. And it was when the game first came out and nobody had any idea how to play. And I still actually use this book sometimes because it has some random name generators in it. But basically, you know, this has got like, oh, you're new to 3rd edition. Like this is like a how to build your character, how to roll ability scores. And then it gives you advice like, oh no, I rolled a 3, or how to choose your race and class, what advantages those have. If you're a human and you want to be a bard or a cleric or a druid, what are some feat suggestions and skill suggestions that you might take at level 1 that are kind of cool and might work with your ideas? So it's just a bunch of kind of ideas about how to play your character and make certain, you know, choices, which I thought was really fun and clever. Then it has this cool little section here, chapter 37, with a bunch of random tables that let you generate your character's history. This is something we would later see in Pathfinder 1, shocker, in the Ultimate Campaign Guide, where they had their character background creator. Again, they just stole it. They stole it from this. This determines where your climate came from, what your community was like, how different it is if you're elf or dwarf, what's your family like, what's your family's reputation, their power, how are you educated, all sorts of just cool random tables to build a random history about your character. And then there's a quiz that you can take, answering questions yes or no to help determine your alignment. Certain questions will give you bonuses or penalties to different alignment types, so you can answer the questions to determine your character's alignment. And then at the very end of the book, they have a bunch of names, just like 3 pages of just names, which I thought was also really, really cool. So yeah. Other than that, it's not a particularly thrilling book. So I'm going to give the Hero Builder's Guidebook for 3rd edition D&D a C. Good stuff. 3.5 Arms and Equipment Guide. Basically, there's only 2 types of people who like this book. Car op munchkins and people who were just way too obsessed with, like, hyper simulationism. This introduced Mercenaries and Hirelings to 3rd edition, but Mercenaries and Hirelings didn't really work well in 3rd edition. The GP system didn't really it didn't scale well to them, and the way that 3rd edition was designed to be characters that were kind of more superheroic rather than just mercenaries like they were in 1st edition meant that hirelings and henchmen and mercenaries never really felt like they were needed, and they kind of felt broken at times. This introduced rules for vehicles. I have never liked vehicle rules. This book also had just a ton. This book feels like it's like a Pathfinder 2 book. It's just got strange, weird items like, oh, this is a gun that shoots candles that heal people when the wax melts. And here's my Zeppelin mount vehicle, or my mobile turtle vehicle thing. Oh, I need to know what type of vehicle I have. Where is the turning radius located? So I could. I have no interest in doing this in any D&D game ever. Pathfinder 2 has driving rules. I would never use them ever.
GM Scott tipped $10. Gotta run. I'll catch the VOD.
GM Scott, thank you so very much. Appreciate you. I don't know why. I think our bot left the chat. Because I don't see our bot actually responding and posting people's chat. So I don't know. Maybe there's a problem with Stream Elements. Thank you, GM Scott, for that. I hope you enjoy your night, and I look forward to you catching up the VOD. Let me know what you think. Thank you, GM Scott. Appreciate you. Anyways, Arms and Equipment Guide is just a bunch of random magical items and a bunch of silly equipment. Like, oh, look at this. Oh, it's the blade of the duelist, and then the handle comes out and makes a little knife. Oh, that's so cool. Arms and Equipment Guide gets a D from me. It's not that great. How is everybody doing tonight? Just want to say thank you to everybody who's come out and support the channel tonight. Thank you for your tips. It is very, very appreciated as we kind of ease back into this. Hopefully everyone is doing well. If you do have any questions, let me know in chat. I'd be happy to answer them as we go through that. And is that where the D&D movie got it from? Probably. I would assume so. Welcome back from your vacay. Well, thank you, Entheo. Appreciate it. Appreciate you. Yeah, vacation was fun, and it was nice. It was relaxing. A lot of work to do this week. I got some doctor's appointments and streams, and it's just been a crazy week, but looking forward to it. Getting ready for Origins here in a few weeks, end of June. So I guess we have almost 6 or 7 weeks, but it'll be fun. We're going to hopefully meet up with some of our Patreon patrons there, and we'll probably do some podcasting, maybe some video casting, hopefully play some games. So I think it's going to be really, really fun to get a chance to meet everybody. We're going to definitely do at least one wider KOLC meetup. And again, yeah, it'll be really fun. Yeah, I'm pretty much... Oh, Stream Elements is here. I don't know why it's not showing people's tips. I'll have to look into that later. Isaiah's voice is all gravelly due to a stomach bug, and so I'm watching the stream instead of playing 40k Darktide with friends. Can't you play 40k Darktide without voice chat? I would think you should be able to, right? Sean needs to get their Origins ticket. Yeah, they should not sell out, Sean. I don't think you're in any rush there. Recap. When do live plays start? May something or other? Yeah, London. So a lot of that comes down to basically people's schedules. Aaron is on vacation, but they also just had a death in the family. So I don't know what his schedule is going to be like when he gets back. But we originally were thinking the first week of May, but I think May 2nd isn't going to work because of those aforementioned things with Aaron and his family. So I think it'll probably get pushed back to May 9th or May 16th.
Tipped $15, crashing the party late.
Thank you, Rick S. Appreciate it. Appreciate you crashing the party. Rick, this month, I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to send you a message after this stream. I want to do the Traveler stream this month, finally. So I just want to, if it works for your schedule, I want to get that on the books. We can get it set up. So that'll be very fun. I'm looking forward to it. Rick says, let's do it. Yeah. An opportunity to read through the Traveler book on vacation. So I'm at least a little bit more knowledgeable than I was before. So it'll be a much more valuable stream now that two people actually know what the game is. Granted, I don't have experience like you do, but at least I understand the basic concepts of the game. Moved to Columbus last year, so this will be my first Origins. Awesome, Sean. It'll be a lot of fun. I think you'll have a lot of fun with it. Origins is much more low-key than Gen Con. Gen Con is awesome, but it is overwhelming in its size, and quite frankly, the number of people that attend can be a little bit frustrating and overwhelming. It is a sight to be seen, but it can be very frustrating. Origins is much more low-key, but I think it'll be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it, and of course, like I said, I love Columbus. I love the food there. There's some great restaurants there on High Street and over at North Market, and I love exploring all that. I have some friends there, and we're really looking forward to seeing some of our patrons. All right. Good stuff. I wonder why PF2 doesn't have as much sandboxy content as PF1. It's very complicated, but basically it comes down to Pathfinder 2 really thrives on a very tight, narrow range of the type of monsters that you can encounter and have it be even remotely interesting. Too low out of that range and the fights are just a joke. Too high out of that range and you have no chance. And so because of that balance that they've put into the game, it means that if the players just kind of explore and go off on their own and head into an area that they shouldn't be, or head into an area that's too weak for them, it's not going to be fun because the game system can't really adapt or handle that. So that means that the encounters that you design have to be kind of tailor-made to the PCs in order for it to be to work. Like, yeah, okay. Well, everybody in chat's basically bringing it up. Casey is saying balanced. Sean is talking about encounters being prepped. Yeah, the only way you could get away with it is if the players, like, you're prepping the encounters before you move into an area. But that's going to put a lot of extra work on the GM. It could be difficult to do. And you say suffering from tight math, and that's kind of true. Everything that you do in a game design, has a cost. It has a price. Sometimes it's how much work or how much mental, CPU space the player has to take or the GM has to take in order to keep all the things running in the game. Sometimes it's complexity on your character sheet. But sometimes, in the case of the math being very tight, means the challenge range of the game is pretty compressed. It's pretty squished. So that's the reason why we don't see those sandboxes. Ooh. Here's a saucy one. I love this game, and this is part of one of the many things I want to do with, if Derek created his own version of D20, I would kind of beg, borrow, and steal from a lot of this. Now, this is Iron Heroes. This is created by Mike Merles. Yes, that Mike Merles of D&D. He originally did this as a small book called Book of Iron Might, but then they kind of transformed it into their own system. This is a variant player's handbook. So the idea is that you would play your normal 3rd edition campaign, but you would use Iron Heroes instead of the normal character classes in your player's handbook. So what are Iron Heroes and what really defines them? Well, we've got a couple of classes. We have the Archer, the Armiger, the Berserker, the Executioner, the Harrier, the Hunter, the Man-at-Arms, the Thief, the Weapon Master. That's right. They're all martial. This is a very low magic game. There's only one class called the Arcanist, which is capable of casting spells. Now, then they talk about what's going on here in the setting, but the real meat and potatoes of this game were the classes. And the way that these classes worked is it looks just like a D20. It looks like a Pathfinder class, right? It looks like a 3rd edition class, right? You've got your base attack bonus. You've got your, different types of things here, your special abilities. But the big difference is in this game, every class got access to a token pool. So, for example, the Berserker. The Berserker, aka your Barbarian, had access to a token pool called the Fury pool. And this would start the encounter at 0. Every time a friend was defeated, you would gain 5 Fury. If you suffered an attack, you would gain 1 Fury. If you spent actions to stoke and build your rage, that would give you some Fury. And then there were other feats and actions and abilities that would add to your Fury. So in other words, you'd start the battle at 0 Fury, and then as things happen to you that would be kind of pro-barbarian-ish, your Fury would build up. Then you would get Berserker abilities as you leveled up that would let you spend those Fury tokens in order to do really cool, awesome, barbarian Berserker Uber attacks, right? Like March of Ruin, Blade of Despair, Relentless Attack, Splintering Storm. So, like Splintering Storm lets you attack with such force that armor and shields can barely turn them aside. You must pay 2 Fury tokens for each Splintering Strike you make. If this attack misses an opponent, but would have hit them if it weren't for their shield, do the damage against their shield. And so this was the Berserker. But this is very different than the Archer class. Okay. Here's the Archer class. There's the Archer class. The Archer class gets an aim pool. And the Archer does very different things in order to build up. They don't, when their friends get killed, they don't gain aim points. They gain aim points by like focusing on their prey, taking their time to, if they might spend a round just aiming and gain like 8 or 9 or 10 aim points because they're just literally spending the whole round aiming at their shot. And then they unleash these completely, devastating shots. There was one built around armor and taking damage. There was another one, the Executioner was sort of like a lethal warrior that could cut people and make them bleed. It's not like it's like the way a rogue fights, but not like stealing rogue, but like the bloody killing death master rogue. More like an assassin, really. Anyways, it was a very cool game. I really like the interesting system. I think it's a little kludgy. I would change things and make it better. But the idea of it is very sound because I think the token pool system encourages a certain type of play style, and then you get rewarded for that play style. And I like that play pattern. So Iron Heroes, I'm going to give a B to. I think it was really cool. Yeah. All right, someone asked me about my favorite 2nd edition book. That's a good question. I don't see it. We may have to wait. But we will do a 2nd edition book. It's the AD&D 2nd edition Monster Manual. So this was the Monster Manual for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition. Pretty cool. Classic. Look at all these campaign settings that they used to have. Forgotten Realms, Ravenloft, Darksun, Alquadim, Greyhawk, Dragonlance. And we hadn't even gotten to Planescape and Birthright and, geez, I think there was at least 2 or Red Steel. I think there was at least 2 or 3 other ones that came out. So, I mean, this is the 2nd edition Monster Manual. The art, you have art by Tony DiTerlizzi, which I love. I love his artwork. That's where people first got introduced to them. The classic style of 2nd edition. You get a monster on a page. Every stat block includes the terrain and climate that monster is found in. It talks about how frequent is a monster, rare or common. When you encounter it, how does it get encountered? As a solitary creature, as a group? Of course, very famously, there were no demons in this book, only the Batazu and the Tanari for the devils. I mean, it's a classic monster book. This book was an improvement on the 3-ring binder sets. -411. I have the 3-ring binder sets too. I agree. I think the 3-ring binder set was kind of a failure. I don't think that whole system works. Just put it in a book. Listen, these monsters are boring as shit. They don't do anything cool. But you know what? It is it is the monster manual that we got for 2nd edition. Yeah. All right. Monster Manual, 2nd edition, gets a C. It's a serviceable monster manual. I don't really have any particular feelings about it one way or the other, except for the Tony D art, which really I thought was really, really quite cool and a lot of fun. This book got a lot of use back in the day. A lot of backpacks being carried around to friends' houses and school and up to the library and stuff. Good times. This game sucked. So, believe it or not, this is Mutants and Masterminds 3rd edition. But when Mutants and Masterminds 3rd edition first got released, it got released as DC Adventures, the Hero's Handbook. And maybe that's part of the reason why I don't like Mutants and Masterminds 3rd edition. Obviously, it was a crossover, but the book was just way too much stuff on DC. And I didn't like how they changed the rules in Mutants and Masterminds 3rd edition already. But then this book, I thought, just was not laid out well. It didn't really feel like it was trying to help you build your own character as much. It felt less focused on narrative games and focused more on just like, oh, look at all the cool characters from DC and how you can stat them, make them in our game. And so, yeah, not my favorite book. This was a big flop for us when this came out. And I still to this day don't really like the Mutants and Masterminds 3rd edition system, but it's fine. It works great. It works reasonable. Our last Mutants and Masterminds campaign we did was 3rd edition, but I've always felt like any of the Marvel and DC games, except for one, were just really bad. I did not like this book. I didn't like the style. I give it a D. D for DC Adventures. On the other hand, this is Mutants and Masterminds 2nd edition. Mutants and Masterminds, that is Omega, and that is, what was his name? The champion? No, the Centurion. Mutants and Masterminds 2nd edition, I felt was the hallmark of the game system. We played this an incredible amount of times. It uses the 3rd edition rule set for Mutants and Masterminds. It's a superhero game with rules on how to build your character. And the way you build a character in Mutants and Masterminds is you get a certain number of power points depending on what kind of game you're playing. If you're playing, powerful heroes, you might get 150 power points. If you're playing more low-level heroes, like maybe young X-Men or, sort of Daredevil, Streets of New York type style, you might get 100 power points or 120 power points. You then use those power points to buy everything about your character. Stats cost a certain number of points. Skills cost a certain number of points. Feats cost a certain number of points. It's actually 1 point per feat. And then the majority of your points go to powers. And the book has a laundry list of powers: time control, transfer, transform, radiation, vibration control, weather control, super strength, telekinesis, swimming. And they all have points. And the more points you spend in that power, the more powerful that power is. It's 3rd edition base, so the DCs go up. The ranges go up. The AoE of that ability goes up. The amount of damage that your super speed or super strength or your weather control can do goes up as you put more and more points into it. So it was a very cool system. We had a lot of fun with it. But for me, the biggest element of this game that changed the way that I did it, the way that I ran games, period, was this section here. This is things that I think every superhero game should have. And I think it's super important. So the first thing here is on the left, you have what's called extra effort. And extra effort is a way for a character to gain a bonus to a die roll. It can increase their movement for a round. It can increase their carrying capacity for a round. It can increase the power level of their power that they're about to use for a round. It can let them get an immediate reroll on it's called willpower, on any sort of effect that like locks you out or takes you out of the game, like a stun or a mind control or a paralyzation. It lets you get an additional action on your turn to either move or to make another standard action. This does not cost a hero point. A superhero can always do this. What this does is it increases your fatigue level. So if you use extra effort once, you become fatigued. If you use extra effort twice, you become exhausted. And if you use extra effort 3 times, you knock yourself out through the strain of the power. So this was a really cool way that no matter what was happening in the game, heroes always had the ability to push themselves further, taking their abilities literally beyond what the character sheet allowed them to do in order to gain that extra edge. But there were hero points as well. And hero points let you do truly remarkable things. One is improve a roll. Now, we know this from Pathfinder 2, and if you know our game and our game system, you'll know that we use this rule. We call it the Mutants Masterminds hero point rule, because if you re-roll a d20 roll using a hero point, if you roll between a 1 and a 10, you add 10 to it. So basically, you're not really rolling a d20, you're rolling a d10 plus 10. So in other words, not only does it let you get a re-roll, it means that the lowest you can possibly get is an 11, and most of your results you're going to be, average results going to be 15 or 16. But you could also use a hero point to do things like cancel out the fatigue that you just gained from extra effort. So if you have a hero point, you can basically do this extra effort for free and not suffer any of the penalties. Additionally, with a hero point, you can do things like heroic feat, which basically lets you gain any feat or power from the game that you want for the rest of the fight. Yeah, it's that powerful. You can instantly counter. It's not your turn, but someone throws a big fireball at the party and you're an ice controller. Spend a hero point. You raise an ice shield around the party and protect them from the flame blast. You can do that with a hero point. Now, how do you earn hero points? Well, this is what really changed the game. Oh, I should also point, hero points let you escape from certain death. And lastly, inspiration. Inspiration was a huge deal in me learning about player agency, because inspiration let a player, once per session, to spend a hero point to essentially allow the player kind of the GM role for about 5 seconds. The player could spend a hero point, and the GM still could approve or disapprove. But basically, the player got to basically say, oh, what if that guard is actually my cousin? Or what if the factory that we're fighting in is actually full of radioactive waste, and my character is supercharged by radioactive waste? We didn't really say what kind of factory we were fighting in. You just said it was a warehouse, but maybe it can be radioactive goo. So inspiration allows players to spend a hero point to sort of be more engaged in the creation of the game. But what really changed it for us was how you earn hero points. You earn hero points through setbacks and complications and heroism. Heroism just means the player's acting like a cool hero. You give them a hero point. Complications, though, was huge for us. Complications allowed us to just say, hey, your character I'm going to create a problem for your character. I am doing this narratively because I want to create an interesting moment for our game. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to say that this character, you're like a Martian Manhunter. You're a character from another world. Well, guess what? The police won't listen to you, and they just completely dismiss you because they don't trust you. They're prejudiced against you because you're not from Earth. Here's a hero point for that complication. That was such a revolution for us in the way we played the game. And similarly, Game Master Fiat is another way that you can earn hero points. Lastly, players earn hero points whenever the Game Master bends the rules of the game in the favor of the bad guys. The GM essentially gets to cheat on behalf of the villains, but the heroes get hero points when this happens. This was another big instance for me and why I don't like fudging. This game basically said, yes, as a GM, you can fudge if you think it is appropriate to do so, but it's out in the open, and you're doing it because that's what happens in comic book movies. The villain gets away. But rather than just cheating and pretending like that happened naturally, I'm going to say, nope, I'm doing this. Here's everybody gets a hero point. The villain, I don't know, launches their escape rocket that they had secretly hidden over there, and they escape before you can get to them. Here's a hero point for everybody. This was a massive... This changed the way I play role-playing games. It changed the way I game master. This is an S+ tier game. It's a little outdated for the kind of superhero gaming that I would want to do, but I think this is the best superhero RPG of all time. Mutants Masterminds, S+. All right. We got some time left. Complete Divine. This was a splat book for Divine characters from 3.5 edition. They did a series of splat books for Divine characters, Arcane characters, Martial characters, Wilderness characters for 3.0. They were actually soft cover books. And then a few years later, they released 3.5, and then they basically re-released all these books in hardback. Except they gave them different names and slightly different stuff. It was a real money grab. This is a classic. This is a classic splat book. This book does contain, however, a really fucking cool class, and that is the Favored Soul. So much so that when we played a Pathfinder 1 campaign that went 1 to 20, our Dragon's Delve Mega Dungeon campaign, Tim actually was a cleric, but he really wasn't a cleric. We actually was a Favored Soul. We actually converted this class into Pathfinder 1. The Favored Soul was like a sorcerer cleric. They didn't cast through prayers, they cast through raw divine power. So they were like a sorcerer. They used spontaneous spells that were divine, but then they also gained all sorts of really cool powers from their deity, like eventually gaining damage reduction, angelic or demonic wings. They gained specialization in their deity's weapons. They were very much like a battler, like a combatant. They had what's the word I'm looking for? They had a good attack bonus. They had great saves. In fact, actually, if you can look here, they were like a monk in that they had good saves in all three categories: fort, ref, and will. So no, Lance, not like an oracle, because they didn't cripple themselves with curses needlessly. They were a stout and amazing warriors, and they had really, really good saves that made them incredibly robust and powerful. The rest of this book, though, the Spirit Shaman, not a good class. Then what do you get? Endless prestige classes. Honestly, I've played 3rd edition for 9 years, 10 years. We never used any of these prestige classes ever. Just worthless. Just, I don't know who or what or these were for or why they were in the game. They were just so many of them. And then there's, feats and special abilities and relics and spells and all this other stuff. Complete Divine gets a D. I mean, the Favorite Soul's really cool, but most of these 3.5 splat books I never really use them or reference them. I'm sure some of my players probably took a feat or two out of here once in a while. They may have taken some spells out of here once in a while, but it was really just a splat book. Keep on there. Oh, how appropriate. Here is the 3rd edition version of that book. It's Defenders of the Faith, a guidebook to clerics and paladins. You can see it's much thinner, and it's paper or softback. But this is, you guessed it, the exact same thing, but for 3.0. Now you can really tell the difference in production quality. 3rd edition had this 3.5 did clean up. I don't want to say clean up the art style. I will say this. I love this piece of art. This is the cleric turning like this kind of like vampire warrior. I think that's a very cool piece of art. I really liked the 3rd edition style of art. I thought it was really, really evocative. I liked it. It kind of felt comic booky at times. This book had rules for paladins to get special mounts other than horses, which was really cool. I like that. It gave you all the gear you would need to be a cleric. All this silly, stupid stuff that no adventurer would ever use. Yeah, it contained a bunch of new spells and new abilities. It also contained probably the most, at the time, one of the most broken magical items of all time. Where is it? I don't even know if they have it in here. It's called it was the haste enchantment that you would put on your magical armor. Specific armor and wields. Oh, it's on page 23. It's the beginning of the book. Why not? Yeah, here it is. The speed enhancement. This armor or shield gives +4 haste bonus to AC and gives the player an extra partial action every round as per the haste spell. By the way, this meant in 3rd edition, if you had an extra partial action, you could cast, it was like a standard action. You basically got 2 actions a turn. You could cast 2 spells a turn. It was completely ridiculously broken. Defenders of the Faith, though, is just a splat book of splat books. It gets a D because it is what it is. Let's see. Isaiah says, they were what a dragon sorcerer wishes they were. I wish the dragon sorcerer, I think actually, we're talking about Pathfinder 2 here, by the way, but I think the dragon sorcerer idea can work. But you have to be playing a campaign where the GM is not throwing party level +1 or party level +2 monsters. If the GM is throwing a bunch of party level -1 and a bunch of party level -2 monsters at the party, and you're not super high level, I think the dragon sorcerer, I use my claws, I go into melee, I tear people up. I think it actually could work. Mighty Dave says, so weird to me to play 3.x with no prestige classes. There were so many dead levels. I think it's just because, I mean, that's the way D&D had always been. It's just, you gained a level, you didn't really get anything. I didn't really think of it any different. And prestige classes always felt like it had to be very specific and you had to be very tied into it. It felt like so strange to just add those onto the game randomly and just say, oh yeah, by the way, suddenly I am a sacred geomancer. It's like, what? You've never mentioned this ever before. Yeah, I know, but I qualified for it, so I took it. Yeah, it really led, Eric, exactly. It really led to the idea of the build. And I've never liked the build. I like discovering my character as I play it rather than pre-building it before we even start off on the, campaign. So, I mean, I will say, Isaiah, that although I give them both Ds, like the complete books were better than the original soft books, but maybe they're D pluses or something like that. Here is another races book from 3.5. This one being the Races of Eberron. We already did the races of, I think the Races of Stone, which covered dwarves and Goliaths and gnomes or something. But this covers the Races of the Eberron setting. And that means it covers the Warforged, and it covers Shifters. We got a cool thing here for Shifters. Shifters, which were the two kind of custom races for Eberron. And then it had more, and Changelings, which were like the pseudo doppelganger type people. I forgot about the Kalishtar too. Kalishtar, by the way, were the biologically engineered, kind of perfected beings that were designed to serve as host bodies for the psychic Quori, which came from the realm of the Dal Quor, which is the realm of dreams, which were basically hostile, invading, kind of Cthulhuian entities, but they needed host bodies, and Kalishtar were pretty sweet. The idea of the Kalishtar were very, very cool. Specifically, the Kalishtar, they're like Trill from Deep Space Nine, but with us like a psychic entity, a psionic entity, instead of like a big bug worm that lives in your guts. Very, very, very cool. Then it talks about the different cultures in Corvair and how elves and dwarves and halflings are very different. I mean, in Eberron, halflings are sort of like a primitive tribal people that live in the plains and they ride dinosaurs. It's a very different thing. The elves worship the dead, and they have kind of almost a Mesoamerican feel to them at times. It's a very, very different take on the D&D game world. Races of Eberron actually was pretty cool. There's a lot of cool information in here, especially since these were some, 3 of the new races. And if you didn't play Eberron, this is a cool way to get this, these new races into your game without having to go buy the Eberron book. I actually recall this being pretty good. I'm going to give it a C. Well, while we're here, there she is. I have about 7 copies of this book, so. This is the Player's Handbook. The 3.5, I think. No. Is this 3.5 or 3rd edition? I can't even tell. Actually, don't know. Nope, this is the original one. Okay. The Player's Handbook for 3rd edition was a revolution in the way. I'm not going to talk about 3rd edition. We all know what 3rd edition is. I will say, in late '99 in Dragon Magazine, they started talking about this, how 3rd edition was coming out. Wizards of the Coast had already bought TSR. In fact, one of my favorite things is on the original printings. This is a first printing of Player's Handbook. The code was TSR, which I always thought was really, really cool. Later on, it would become Wizards of the Coast, but the first printings were TSR. This book changed my life, and we had heard the rumors that, a 3rd edition was coming, and then there was started to become this countdown to 3rd edition in Dragon Magazine. Every month, they were giving us a new preview of what was going to be coming. I was a senior in high school, and it was coming out that that summer at Gen Con. Now, at the time, I had not been to a Gen Con. I had not been to any con. I was 17 years old. I was in high school, and that spring of 2000, I graduated high school along with my buddy Aaron, and we went to a game store that was on the other side of town, and we were talking with the game show owner, and we started talking about 3rd edition, and he said, "Oh, if you guys are into gaming, you should check out Origins." And we're like, "What is Origins?" We had heard of Gen Con, but Gen Con at the time was in Milwaukee. There was no way I was getting to Milwaukee, and he said, "Oh, it's a game convention down in Columbus." And, at 17 years old, I'd only been driving for a year or so. Like, Columbus was still kind of like, might as well have been in another state, right? I had never driven that far. But, Aaron and I were like, you know what? We're men, we're graduated from high school. Aaron was 18 at the time, and was probably about to move out and get his first apartment. And I was like, I'm going to be starting college. I'm a man. We're like, let's do it. And so Aaron and I took a day trip. I think it was a Saturday. And we took a day trip down to Origins. We'd never been to a gaming convention before. We didn't stay overnight. It was just a day trip. We drive down there, park the car, we get a badge, we go into Origins. It was my very first con, Origins 2000. And it was such an incredible moment for me. But I remember at the time, Wizards of the Coast had booths, and they used to go to gaming conventions. And they had the castle built up. And we walked our way over to it. You could see it from anywhere in the floor of the convention hall. And we walk in, and there in the middle of the booth, with actually like no crowd around it. It was almost like nobody else could see it. They were walking by it and not paying any attention to it. There was in the middle of the booth a pillar, a decorative kind of plinth or dais. And on top of it was a plexiglass box. Transparent plexiglass box with 2 holes cut in the side. And inside of the box was like a red velvet cushion and a copy of the Player's Handbook. First printing. It's 3rd edition. And you could use the holes in the side of the box to put your hands in, and you could open the book and look through the book. And I think Aaron and I probably sat there and we both probably flipped through the book cover to cover twice, once with him, once with me. And we were in just so much gaming awe of what we thought this game would mean for us. And I mean, this game is my edition of Dungeons and Dragons. It's not my it's not my favorite edition of Dungeons and Dragons. It's not my favorite role-playing game, I should say. But this will always be what. And I grew up playing 2nd edition, even 1st edition with some of my older cousins. I loved 4th edition. I really missed on 5th edition. But 3.0 D&D has so much memory and so much nostalgia tied to me that this will always be my edition of D&D. So I can't even rank this. S plus tier. It's not a perfect game by any stretch of the imagination. It's got some clunky flaws to it, but we all are aware of those. But it was just such an incredible memory maker for me at that time of my life. I mean, my 20s, or my late teens to my mid 20s, late 20s were pretty much defined by this book. So it's a huge part of my life. All right. What is everybody feeling like? I mean, we got half an hour left. Is any requests? Anybody want to talk about anything? Want to shoot the shit? I don't want to just keep going. If we don't want to. Right, for better or for worse, Isaiah. For better and for worse. It is directly responsible. Yeah, for whatever reason, 3.x, I mean, by the time 3rd edition came out, my group wasn't even playing 2nd edition AD&D anymore. We were playing Earth Dawn, we were playing Dragonlance 5th edition. It was all over the place. Something weird, not F20. Okay. All right, we got some stuff. Blaze in the Dark by John Harper is a tour de force. It is a magnum opus. It is his great work. It is perhaps for me one of the most compelling game that we've ever done. Did we do Blaze in the Dark already? We did do Blaze in the Dark. This is a copy. S++. We already did it. This is just another copy of Blaze in the Dark. Cancel. By the way, S++. Scum and Villainy. Blaze in the Dark in space. This is the best science fiction game of all time. And I don't mean this. I mean, like, again, I'm going to give Rick his chance to defend Traveler and all this other stuff. But I am not interested in. I don't really care, how many millicochrons of warp force nacelle my thing is generating, all this other stuff. I don't care about any of that. I want that space opera. I want the space kind of dramatic feel. So Scum and Villainy is literally Blades in the Dark in space, but it does change things a couple of ones. One is it's not quite as grim and gritty as Blades in the Dark is. A lot of people bounce off of Blades in the Dark because of the implied setting, which is this weird post-apocalyptic city that's kind of industrial but filled with ghosts. A lot of people bounce off of that. Scum and Villainy is basically like a pastiche of every Star Wars, Star Trek trope kind of thrown into everything, right? It's very kind of a mixture of all of your classic sci-fi tropes. The game is designed awesome, and I think people love the idea. In Blades in the Dark, of course, everybody has a character sheet, but then you are part of a gang, and the gang itself has its own character sheet. But in Scum and Villainy, you have a ship. And I think people really, really love that you get a ship. And you can pick what kind of ship you want. You can have the Star Dancer, which basically makes you Han Solo, Firefly, right? Very, you know, you're a smuggler, you're a merchant, right? You start with this kind of dumpy looking ship, right? And that changes the kind of jobs and stuff like that that you can do. You can also get the Cerberus, which is bounty hunters and extraction specialists. This is for more of your Cowboy Bebop, you know, maybe Boba Fett, Mandalorian style of game where, you know, your characters are a little bit more violently oriented and are more about, you know, again, tracking people down and doing high stakes extractions and all that other stuff. And then lastly, there is the Fire Drake, which is actually a big ship. It's like a Corvette, almost more like the size of like, you know, the Rebel Alliance blockade runner. And this is where you want to play literally Rebel Alliance. You want to play versus the, you know, fighting the good fight against the galactic hegemonic alliance. You are a member of the sort of rebel faction, and you're actually part of a more of like a warship, where there's actually a lot of people, you know, not just you and your crew or you and your PCs, but NPCs as well. It's a fantastically fun game. I ran a great campaign for my friends. I was really enjoying it. They got stressed out because they liked their characters so much, but they were nervous about what was going to happen to them because you can never tell what's going to happen to you in a game like Scum and Villainy. Unlike D&D, where you basically know what's going to happen to you every time you play. And we ended up quitting. But it was a really cool version of Fast and the Furious in space, and it was really fun. I would play this game again in a heartbeat. I hope to play it with my patrons someday soon, and I think this game is fantastic. S tier. And while we're on that, this is Band of Blades. And Band of Blades is Forged in the Dark. Blades in the Dark style, but it's with military fantasy. This is very much inspired by the Black Company novels of Glenn Cook. In fact, it's almost a direct copy of it. Band of Blades is a very unique and weird game. For starters, it follows a defined path. You could argue that it is actually a linear game. It's kind of like a board game, but instead of at each of the spaces on the board, instead of just like rolling a dice or taking a card from a deck, instead you like do a role-playing session. And like you play a normal role-playing game and you run through a score, but in this game they're called missions. And you kind of see what happens to the rest of the game. It's a very weird approach to playing the game that some people like and some people don't like. Isaiah says, huh? All right, so what I mean is, in every Band of Blades game that you play, they all follow the same principle. You start here on the Western Front, and then you eventually make your way all the way to Skydagger Keep, which is where the campaign ends. At that point in time, you total up your score for the campaign. That's right, you earn score, points, depending on what missions you accomplished and what, you know, if you took certain losses and anything like that, and then you finally see, did you win or not? The other thing, which KC is mentioning here, is you basically have each PC controls sort of an officer in the army who doesn't really go out and do missions, but you kind of decide like this is what the army's going to do. This is how the army's going to move. And then when you launch a mission, you play separate characters who are like the actual soldiers who are going out on the missions. Again, it's a very weird and strange approach. I don't think it's for everybody, but I am really interested and intrigued by this game. I think the way that they integrate the different roles is really, really cool. And I'm going to give it a B without having played it, because I think it has a lot of potential. So B for Band of Blades. It's possible, Sean. You might be able to take the. I mean, yeah, you could definitely take the ideas and make it into a normal style game. But you know, a lot of times I do like to respect what the game designers were trying to do, and you know, I'm not necessarily saying the game wouldn't work like that. I think it could work, but you know, it's really weird actually. Now that I think about it, you really haven't seen too many more Forged in the Dark games. You know, you have Band of Blades, Scum and Villainy, Blades of Dark. You have what's it called? Hack the Planet or something like that. I think that's a Forged in the Dark game. But I don't think there's really a whole lot of them. What else we got over here? We talked about this one before. The Book of Exalted Deeds, the counterpoint to the Book of Vile Darkness. It was just as stupid and just as cheesy. It was maybe even more stupid because at least this stuff, you know, at least with Book of Vile Darkness, you could mostly ignore it. Now suddenly every player was like, oh, I want to be a noble hero. And it's like, oh, heroes can't use poison. Here are good poisons. It's like, what does that even mean? And then, of course, obviously, it ultimately had these vows, including the vows of poverty and vows of chastity and vows of all this such vows of peace. And the vow of poverty basically made your character into a superhero as long as you didn't take, you know, as long as you don't take equipment. But at the end of the day, you know what this book is? You guessed it. It's a splat book. It's just a bunch of new feats, except now they're called Exalted feats. And a bunch of new monsters, but they're angels. Yeah, I wasn't super impressed with the book. I didn't think it was particularly great one way or the other. So yeah, I don't really have a whole lot else to say for that other than, yeah. So what is wrong with splat books? So it's not that anything is wrong with splat books. Well, maybe it is. What is wrong with splat books for me is it's the Cheesecake Factory approach. Okay. A restaurant isn't a better restaurant because it has a bigger menu. And in fact, in my experience, the more things that are on a restaurant's menu, probably more mediocre each of these items are. Now, having options isn't necessarily a bad thing. So that's why I'm saying it's not 100% directly connected with, oh, it's splat book, it's bad. But in my experience, very usually, the better ideas or the best ideas are the ones that the people had first. But they still need to make books. They still need to publish stuff. And so more books get made. And what you're getting is the second or third or fourth tier ideas. You know, it's like American Idol. The first American Idol, Kelly Clarkson. Everybody knows Kelly Clarkson. The third American Idol or whatever, fourth American Idol, Carrie Underwood. Everybody knows Carrie Underwood. The next 10 or 15 that came out of it, nobody knows. Because you know what? They'd gotten the American Idol. They'd found that the cream had risen to the top and what was left wasn't as good. So my problem with splat books is a lot of times it just feels like they're just there to fill space. I don't think that they're doing anything interesting. Ruben Studdard. I think he died actually recently. I could be wrong about that. But yeah, I think that a lot of times it just leads to just drawing from the same well too many times. Secondly, a lot of times it is also very, very hyper specific. And unless you're exactly and specifically using that, it doesn't really have a value to you. And third, it really encourages munchkin power gaming, character building, car opping, bringing 17 books to build a character with. And that's just not a style of play I enjoyed. So that's why I don't like this. Book of Exalted Deeds gets an F for me. I don't care about it one way or the other. All right. I think somebody already successfully guessed this, but my favorite second edition AD&D book is Skills and Powers, because I was a teenager and I wanted to be broken and I wanted to be cheesy as shit. And Skills and Powers let you do that. Oh, you think 6 ability scores are enough? How about 12 ability scores? That's right. Let's break up every single stat into substats. Oh, strength? No. Strength is now muscle and stamina. Dexterity is now aim and balance. Oh, by the way, one of those is good for your armor class. The other one is not really good for anything. So I'm going to max out my balance and lower my aim because I'm never going to use magical items or missile weapons. Anyways, Skills and Powers introduced point buy racial powers. It introduced point buy ability scores. It introduced, you could use your point system to buy different limitations. Of course, it had restrictions and flaws. So you could like, do all sorts of crazy point accounting where you're like, oh, my character is, they can't use bows, so that gives me 2 extra points. And my character refuses to use magical rings, so that gives me 2 more points. And with those 5 points that I have, I'm going to be able to take this spell resistance, which is going to give me a benefit to saving throws against all magic. And it was the car op dream. This whole system was kind of a sign of things to come, actually, as we moved from 2nd edition, I guess, into 3rd edition. And, people started to build their characters and build them out and everything like that. It was quite the cheesy book, but basically it was like a point buy system for D&D 2nd edition. It reintroduced psionics into 2nd edition. And which I don't really particularly like. That being said, I mean, nowadays I think this book is a travesty. Yeah, you could basically custom build your character class by using points. So you could just cherry pick all the best stuff. You could take a bunch of meaningless drawbacks that you could easily play around to get more points to become super broken and powerful. It was a cheesy book. Now, in reality, I'm going to give this book a C, but at the time, I mean, it is my favorite 2nd edition book just because it was it was so broken and so bad. But I mean, it has a very warm place in my heart. What else have we got over here? Oh, Pathfinder 2nd edition Advanced Player's Guide. All right, so what this really comes down to is, do we like the classes in the APG? I mean, yeah, there's some additional ancestries and background. We know how I feel about ancestries. We don't care. That I'm not a big fan of. These are less weird. These aren't like, Konrasu and Onadi or whatever. Cat folk, kobold, orc, rat folk. I'm okay with that. They're not my favorite, but I'm okay with that. But really, it comes down to the classes: Investigator, Oracle, Swashbuckler, Witch. What's interesting too about this book is, and I don't think they really haven't done this too much. Like, this book also gave us additional feats. One of the things that Aaron and I have theorized was that they really wanted you to be able to make a character and only have to reference one book. But this book did introduce new feats.
Mighty Dave tipped $5.
Hey, thanks,
Give
Mighty
skills
Dave.
and powers the S, you coward. Guidebook.
Give it the S. I can't. My teenage Derek gives it the S, but grown-up Derek gives it the C. I'm sorry. But it was interesting because they also add feats here for, fighter and alchemist and core rulebook classes. So it's kind of like the core set of feats that you have is actually spread across 2 books, which is a little strange. We almost felt like they weren't going to do that. They were just going to keep all the classes in one book, so you didn't have to sit there with a stack of books to go through it. Anyways, and of course, there's also, archetypes which were hinted at in the core rule book, and then it gave us all the archetypes. It's a great book. I mean, I personally don't feel like the classes that it introduced, which is to say the Investigator, the Oracle, the Swashbuckler, or the Witch, are particularly great. I have problems with the Oracle. I have problems with the Witch. Swashbuckler is a fine class, but ultimately I think it should be an archetype, not a class by itself. Maybe even the same is true for the Investigator. But it did give us, 60 pages of archetypes. It basically introduced what archetypes mean to Pathfinder 2nd edition. And I think really, really sort of defined what makes this game tick. I do think archetypes are one of the best innovations in Pathfinder 2. It's a great way to do kind of multi-classing without some of the cheesiness or brokenness that multi-classing can oftentimes introduce into a game, which isn't to say that people don't car op and min-max with their archetypes. The spells from the APG were okay. I mean, I think there was nothing. They weren't like Gods and Magic or Legends or any of those other books, which had really, really bad spells. But the APG is a solid book. I mean, it performs well, and it introduced classes that people desperately wanted. I didn't want them, but it did give us archetypes. And I mean, many of the archetypes in this book are very, very solid, and it really showed us how the game works. I really like the cover too, art. I'm going to give the APG, I don't know, like a B. I'm actually going to give it like a B plus. I think it's a pretty good, solid book. It's well designed. It's compact. It avoids, it's not just splat. It actually gives us it gives us archetypes. It gives us new classes. It gives us, it really kind of expanded the game a little bit, especially with the archetypes. So B plus. It's in danger of becoming splat though. Like, I'll give APG a pass, but let's be clear. By the time we get to spells and magic and guns, those are splat books. Yeah, exactly, Eric. That's exactly right. Eric is exactly right. Archetypes feel like prestige classes done right. And I completely agree with that sentiment, Eric, by the way, completely. Case in point, my group, my players, me as a player, really never used prestige classes in 3rd edition D&D. We use archetypes all the time. Even if we're not using free archetype, we use archetypes all the time in our PF2 games. I think they're a lot of fun and a great way to sort of build up the character, change the characters around. Casey says, feels like All Spells Ranked was so long ago at this point. When did that series wrap? Last summer? That feels correct, Casey. If I go to our All Spells Ranked, the final stream was August 11th. 2022. So that was our final stream of All Spells Ranked. And then we took a break for a few weeks or maybe like a month. And then in September, we started in on All Archetypes Ranked. And All Archetypes Ranked took us about 5 months as well. And we finished that one up, I think, in March, right? So, yeah. Maybe February or something like that. But yeah, it was a while. I got some more Pathfinder 2 books over here. Gamemastery Guide. I want to like this book, and I don't. I originally liked this book kind of a lot, but as time has gone on, I like it less and less. I mean, all right. Let me be fair about this. Okay, let's talk about this book. Number one, they give you a lot of information. Here's the problem I have with this book. This is a nice last call thing. A lot of the information in this book, especially this Game Mastery Basics section, seems to directly counteract what the game is trying to do. There's a lot of advice in this Game Mastery section, which seems to be at odds with the way that Pathfinder 2 is created. I'm not saying that the advice that they give in here, actually, I am saying the advice, there's a lot of advice in here that I hate. Let me just put it that way. Section 1 for me is an F. I don't like what they had to say here. They say things like, hey, if a fight's going really hard, lower their hit points and make it easy. I just don't like that style of GMing, right? I just don't like it. That being said, they gave us the rules on how to build creatures, hazards, items. Great section. Fantastic. We needed that for the game. It gives us great advice about that. Where is it lacking? It doesn't tell us how to build interesting creatures. It doesn't tell us how to build interesting encounters. It tells us how to mechanically assemble a mathematically balanced fight, but it doesn't tell us how to give it life or how to make it interesting or like very, very compelling. Then they give us a ton of rules here in the subsection. A lot of variant rules, most of which are essentially variations of clocks, right? Which is accumulating victory points in various ways, like influence, research, chases, intimidation, reputation. These are all just gain points. I don't hate this section. I think it is a little uninspired, but I do think it's fairly reasonable. I love page 180. I love the variant rules. This is an A+ section. I've used a lot of these variant rules myself. I've used the stamina and resolve. A lot of us have used the free archetype. I've used proficiency without level. I think some of these alignment, the deep backgrounds, I think a lot of these features are very, very interesting. I like that they compel the game. I'd love to play a proficiency without level game someday. And I love that they talk about this. I wish this section was more of the book. And then lastly, there's the NPC gallery, which I would never use. It's just not something that I would really ever need to use or want to use. So Game Mastery Guide, for me, is a fantastic mechanical resource. But I felt like the advice that they gave for GMing was it was too much off of the basis of what I would want to see, especially in a game like Pathfinder 2. And I just think like they introduced this recall knowledge. This is a great example here. There's this thing here that says false information. So you have recall knowledge, which is already a very poorly described skill, but they introduced this concept, right? If you critically fail, it's a secret. If you critically fail this secret recall knowledge check, the GM is instructed to lie to you, right? That's what it says in recall knowledge in the core rulebook. You're like, okay, so we got to roll and it's got to be secret because I don't know if the GM is lying to me or not when I get information from them. Number one, I think that is problematic on so many levels. But then you go to this book and it tells you a critical failure to recall knowledge can result in you needing to convey false information, requiring some improvisation. If you aren't careful, this information could be perceived by the PCs as too silly, or worse, it could derail the game. For example, if the PC's misinterpreted text about the god of commerce, Abadar, saying they believe the god is an incompetent, chaotic spendthrift who's bad with money is absurd, so don't be silly. But similarly, if they incorrectly believe Abadar will reward them with great wealth if they ring the bell in 4 different corners, this could send them on a wild tangent. So then why are we lying to them at all? This GM advice basically says, don't lie to your players because it's going to mess up the game. But the game tells you to lie to players. That's why to be fair, I think the GM advice is better than what is in the core rulebook, but it is in direct odds with the core rulebook. And that's what I don't like about that section. Anyways, I really like the variant rules, but the other problems give it a minus in my book. So I have to give this book a B minus. I think a lot of the mechanical stuff in this book is very, very solid, but that GM advice is I just don't think it's the right advice for this game. So B minus for the Game Mastery Guide. All right, we got time for one more. And then you know what? We'll go back to the main screen. If anybody wants to chat about anything else, I know I was out last week. I had a brief stream from the seas. So if anybody wants to come and hang out and chill, also, we're only at $55 tonight. So, and we took off last week. So we're trying to drum up some support here. You let me know, folks. What do I need to do to get you excited? Let's do. Oh, weird. All right. We will end with masks. So masks was, for me, it was when I first became aware of Magpie Games as a publisher, and Brennan Conway as a game designer. I'm like 99% sure that Urban Shadows came first, but masks to me represents sort of the third or fourth generation in Powered by the Apocalypse evolution. And I think it is a fantastic example of this. This game is a superhero game, but it is a superhero game. It is not trying to be a generic superhero game like Mutants Masterminds. This is trying to be Monsterhearts, but with superheroes instead of monsters. You are young heroes. You are teenagers or very young adults. And you are not just dealing with superhero issues. You're dealing with identity issues. And who am I going to be? And how do I control these powers? Do I control these powers? Do these powers control me? Am I in charge of my life, or is my life going to, be out of my hands? So it is, Quark says, it is whiny teen heroes. Yeah, kind of Quark. But I mean, I think part of the thing here is the point of this game is to rise above that, right, Quark? It's to see what players can do with these characters who are flawed. I think I think we always forget this, is that the characters that we appreciate the most in media are flawed, and we like to see them struggle, and we like to see them deal with their demons and their past, and try to overcome. And Masks introduced a lot of the concepts that Magpie has continued to use with their condition systems, with their comforting people moves, and it is a very, very interesting take on the Powered by the Apocalypse engine that is sort of led into games like Root and into Avatar, and I think it is a really, really interesting way that that they do it. I think Masks is really cool. It's really interesting. I'm going to give Masks a B+. I think it's a really, really interesting and solid game, and I'm a big fan of it. So, and you know what, Quark, just for you. Here, we'll do one more Pathfinder 2 book. All right, it's the Bestiary 3. Now remember, I don't like bestiaries. All right, so let's get the main thing out. Bestiary 3 was supposed to be the troops book. I feel like the troop mechanic did not work. I know I'm not a big. I didn't. You can disagree with me on chat. Let me know. I just didn't feel like troops did what I want them to do. Troops to me were supposed to be a simple and easy way to be able to play a large group of people. I almost wanted them to be kind of like minion rules. And honestly, I felt like they were more complicated to play than a normal character. Like if I go to the Shambler troop here in page 302 at the back of the book, it's like the rules for troops are just so complicated. Like it's like it starts off as gargantuan. So it's already taking up 4 squares by 4 squares, which is like larger than most rooms in most Paizo dungeons. Okay. Then where are the troop rules here? Right. Then you have all these special moves that are associated with troops, like troop defenses, form up, troop movement, and then as they take hit point damage, they reduce in size. I was like, this seems more complicated to run, not less complicated to run. I tried to use one of these in, I think, Rise of the Runelords, and I was just like, ugh, this thing is horrible. I just don't want to use this. That being said, look, I'm never using this monster in my game. Okay. Oh, I need a intelligent bat-like humanoid that live in warm forests and drink the blood of other creatures, particularly people. Guess what? I'm just going to use a vampire. If I need something that is a bat-like humanoid that is going to drink the blood of living creatures, I'm just going to use a vampire. I'm not going to use a Sabosan. Whatever that thing is not ever going to be used in my campaign. What is this? An alien entity called the Rulachak Chaktalakacha. Oh, was the one bat-like humanoid that feeded on the living not enough for you? Here's another bat-like humanoid that feeds on the living. My point is, I just don't, and then of course randomly Moose, which, apparently is quite the killer in Quest for the Frozen Flame. So a lot of these things are just, to me, unnecessary. There might be some glints of gold scattered in amongst these monster designs. I'm not going to just shit on all these monster designs because I haven't read them all, but for the most part, they are, they're not that, I didn't find them to be that compelling. And then, Moose brings us up a tier. We had a great moose fight at the start of Quest for the Frozen Flame. It's actually a hilarious fight. I love it. The moose crit, the barbarian almost dropped him in the first time. Again, this book kind of is the same thing with like splat books. It's so niche or so niche. It's like, how am I ever going to use this in my game? All of these monsters are so dramatically unique. You almost feel like I can't just drop this into my game. It's like, I can't just put this into my adventure. Like the whole plot of the entire adventure feels like it should just circle around one of these creatures, let alone all of them. So yeah, I do think it's kind of problematic in that respect. There's something to be said. Interesting and unique monsters are almost sometimes a problem because unless you're only going to fight it once, right? Anyways, troop rules did not really do it for me. And it's a bestiary, and it's the third one. I'm going to give it a D. Sorry. I don't like bestiaries already. I'll give bestiary the first one okay one because it always has the most, the monsters that 99% of you are going to use 99% of the time. But then as they get to later monsters, they just throw all this weird shit at me. Yeah, right. By definition, it's like it's the third best bestiary, right? Because if there was a really cool idea, they would have put it in the first two. So you're getting the third place bestiary. And I thought the troop rules were just a huge letdown in this book. I would have probably given the book a C or a C-, but it was a huge letdown because of those troop rules. All right. So we can hang out here for a few more minutes if you all have some questions, if you all have some thoughts, anything that you want to bring up, conversate with, talk about. I would be happy to dig into this. Let me ask you a question while you guys are here. I know there's only 30 of you, but I've been thinking, why do you hate the bestiaries? That's a great question. I do not like the bestiaries because I feel like one of the core problems with a lot of games is that there's this idea that people always want to be,
Sean C. tipped $44,
Oh.
$1 off of Target because of the severe lack of 13th age.
Sean, thank you for that massive tip. Thank you so much. That's fantastic. I am sorry for the Earth of 13th age. There's just not that many 13th age books that there are. We've already done 13th age. We haven't done the 13th age core book. We've done True Ways and Bestiary. The actual 13th age book is still somewhere to be found amongst all of our piles of stuff like that. But again, 13th age is really, really, I think one of my favorite D20 systems, fantasy 20 systems, and I really appreciate it. And I'm sure I will glower about. We'll talk about 13th age for a good 5 or 10 minutes when we finally do find the core book. So I do look forward to that. So why do I hate bestiaries? They're the second best-selling books behind player guides. Of course. I mean, that makes sense, right? I mean, players buy all the player guides and then GMs buy all the monster books. I think it's because I think GMs feel like the way to make encounters and adventures interesting is just by throwing weird, unique monsters at everybody. I don't necessarily agree with that. I actually prefer monsters that the PCs encounter again and again and again and again. I like for party people to encounter monsters 2 or 3 times because I want them to sort of learn the monsters. I think all these bestiaries lead to a habit with GMs and adventure writers, which I do not like, which is they drop in this monster into a fight and the monster doesn't even necessarily feel like it belongs here, but whatever, we're dropping it in anyways. And it's got a lot of weird abilities. It's got a lot of strange shit going on. And you encounter it, and maybe you're making recall knowledge checks, or maybe you're just figuring it out through the School of Hard Knocks, and then you beat it, and you're like, cool, we've learned, we've gained, and then you'll never fight that monster again. And I just don't like that play pattern, and I think that having all of these weird monsters and bestiaries leads people to just being like, well, how am I going to make this encounter interesting? I know, I'll throw some weird monster in it. Oh, I'll throw a Semosan, bat drinking, not vampire creature, and that'll make the encounter cool. I disagree. I don't think that makes the encounter cool. And I think that bestiaries tend to do that. Secondly, I think that the bestiaries, as they go on, become more and more and more and more and more niche. And I just look at a monster and I go, unless I am playing a campaign in a Asia-influenced version and we're in a dark temperate forest and the party members are seeking children that have been stolen from a local village, which also produces a lot of grain, this monster makes no sense, and I would never use it. So, that is my main reason. Also, because I think bestiaries are not designed for use. Nothing to me is more important to be able to be easily used, easily referenced, quickly referenced than a bestiary. A GM is juggling so many different things in a combat that the last thing I ever want to be able to do, I want everything on one page. I never want to have to leave that page. I don't want to have to look up a rule. I don't want to have to look up a spell. I just want everything that creature can do on one page. I want it to be laid out in such a beautiful way that I won't miss that the creature randomly is slowed to sometimes, or that the creature doesn't die. Like you're reading, you're like, okay, I get what the spell ability. And then you forget the final line of text where it says, note, this can never kill a player. I like that kind of style of writing drives me insane with monster books. This is a reference text. I want it to be hyper efficient and hyper well designed. For me, it's not about sitting around, enjoying a nice cup of chamomile while I flip to the monster book and envision really cool scenarios where no, like this is a war manual. It's something that I'm going to be using while we're, at battle. And I'm going to be under fire from my PCs. I got to quickly look and see what this thing can do and then get back to it, because the last thing I want to do as the dungeon master is take up any amount of time, right? It's already bad enough that players have to wait so long for their turns in cyclical based initiative F20 systems. The last thing I want to do is eat up a ton of time on my turn. I don't know what this monster could do. I'll give you a great example of this. Spoiler alert for Abomination Vault. Minor spoiler. So we'll go with that. We recently restarted playing for Abomination Vault. We picked up where we left off, and the party originally had fought the boss of the dungeon, this spellcaster named Volok. The first time we played through the game back last year, and they cast slow on him, and he critically failed, and so I just killed him immediately because I was like, well, he's a critically failed spellcaster. He's slowed too, and he's a spellcaster. He'll just never be able to do anything. So I was like, you know what? He died, kind of like a bitch. So let me bring him back. Let's have another fight. Let's see that he doesn't get, auto killed this time. And we started the fight off, and someone else won initiative. And then it was second turn, and it was his initiative. And I looked at his stat block, and I said, okay, here are all of his spells. Vomit, swarm, worm's repast, phantom pain, that line spell of darkness, right? He's an occult caster. And I went, I don't know what the targets or range of any of these spells are. I'm going to guess most of them are 30 feet. But to be honest with you, I don't know. So if I want to know what this spellcaster can do this round, I either have to have an encyclopedic knowledge of what all 17 of these spells do and what their range is and what their targets are, or two, I'm going to have to sit there and be like, I guess I'm casting this spell. Flip to the book. What does the spell do? Nope, 30-foot range. Can't cast it. All right, next spell. How about that one? Flip through the book. Nope, 30-foot range. All right, how about this one? Oh, cool, 60-foot range. I'll cast that spell. That is, to me, unacceptable. And I probably have a better knowledge of spells than there are definitely people out there who have much better Pathfinder 2 knowledge than me, but I probably have a better Pathfinder 2 knowledge than most people, certainly just through doing all the spells ranked. So it was very frustrating, and I was like, this is not how you do it. Yeah, that's a big part of what I don't like, Quark. I don't like the design of the stat blocks. I don't like how much referencing you have to do in the nature of a monster book. I want everything to be just in there, one page, half a paragraph. Isaiah says, to be fair, a lot of people do like to just look at the monster manuals and goes, neat. Yes, exactly, Isaiah. You are right. They are writing them to sort of serve two different audiences, right? Like, the monster manual needs to be a quick reference, but it also needs to serve the audience who just wants to leaf through the book, because realistically, even those GMs know I'm probably never going to use any of these monsters. So at the very least, it's got to be an enjoyable reading experience. How was the cruise? Any highlights? You know what? Actually, no. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It was a day longer. My mom and I usually go for a 4-day cruise. This was a 5-day cruise, Sunday through Thursday, and we got back Friday morning. And it's one of Royal Caribbean's smaller ships, which my mom likes because it's not as big of a ship for her to have to walk around on. And so there's not as much to do on the ship, which is fine because I've been there. I've done that. I've done the bigger ships. There was a lot of families. which made it a little bit more, loud and convoluted than I would like. But, both the ports of call were lovely. Key West is a fine town. I got to drink some nice rum and hang out. And my mom and I went to antique shops. And then we spent a day in Haiti. And I got to just lay on a beach on a hammock under a palm tree with the waves crashing next to me. But, the shows were okay. They weren't great. The food was good, but not great. I slept like the dead. I always sleep really, really well on cruises. I think the combination of it being so dark and the slight gentle rocking of the sea, I do sleep really, really well. So there is that. Yeah, it was pretty relaxing. I mean, I've got a lot to do, but, having this channel in some ways makes it more difficult to relax. I'm not going to lie. Because I go out there and I'm like, oh, I should be streaming, or what's going on, and what's my viewers, what's my community thinking about and looking about, Let's see. I know schedules are a mess, but have you started prepping and planning for the Root campaign? Yeah, I think we talked about this a little bit, Casey. The Root campaign was supposed to start like May 2nd, but Aaron is going to be dealing with death in his family and coming back from vacation at the same time. And so unfortunate timing there for him. But we're probably going to push that back a week or two. So May 9th or May 16th. In terms of prepping or planning for the Root campaign, what you're going to see actually is you're going to see me do a session 0 and really explain the game to the players on the air. We'll probably do a stream maybe before that separately just to talk about the Root campaign or the Root game. But in terms of like planning for it, no, because I'm going to let the players do the collaborative world building. We're going to build up our copy of the Woodland and set some of the initial, challenges and issues. And then we'll see what the players go from there. I mean, obviously, depending on what playbooks the players choose, that's going to have a huge influence on how the type of games roll out. If we get like a ranger and an arbiter and an adventurer, that's a very, kind of almost heroic band of vagabonds, versus if we get like a scoundrel or a thief, right? Like it's going to be a lot more like kind of zany antics. So I think we're going to still wait and see for that. So, is there an efficient solution for spellcasting creatures? Yes, but the solution involves them not actually casting spells, Quark. The solution is to just have spellcasting creatures just have like special abilities in their stat block that just say 2 actions with the magic tag, and it does this. It's not this is what 4th edition D&D did. And it kind of gets around the problem of having to look up and cross-reference all of these spells. Isaiah says, and limited page space. I agree with you. I just get here's the key, Isaiah. You're absolutely right, which is why I don't think monsters should use feats, and I don't think monsters should use spells. Monsters should just have ability. Monsters shouldn't even work on remotely the same axes as the same axes as player characters. What player characters can and should do on their sheets is very different. Spells are fine for characters. I mean, they're not great, but there's still a lot of them on your sheet. But on an NPC that you're just flipping open, like I just don't think that's the way to do it. This is not the way, as they say. Dan says, can I convince you that cruises are an unethical thing to engage in? Yeah, Dan, I don't think I would argue that they are ethical. I mean, I would argue that vacation and traveling for leisure in general is fairly unethical. You are engaging in wasteful money spending for no other reason than enjoyment. So yeah, I mean, cruises are a big ship that goes in a big circle, goes nowhere, and burns a lot of fuel. Yes, it is. It's definitely not doing anything good by the world. Let's see. Sean, what I think makes the 13th Age books just absolutely worth every penny is hearing how the designers disagree with each other and how they interpret and run rules. Yeah, the sidetrack commentary in 13th Age makes it a very interesting book. It's sometimes a little, normally that kind of style of like really like editorial writing irritates me, but they do it in such a good way and really highlight about how like, look, this is not, our game isn't balanced this way. Like our game isn't this tightly tuned fine. It's not a watch. It's not a Swiss made watch. Okay. It's at best it's a, I don't know. It's a sundial, right? It's pretty rugged. It's not going to be accurate, but it'll be mostly accurate. And that's what I really, really appreciate about it. Roll for combat. FYI, this TikTok about WotC Pinkerton incident has over 1 million views. I mean, it's TikTok. Who the hell knows? I mean, again, it's ridiculous. It's crazy, but it's like, what are we supposed to do with it? I mean, TikTok in general is just crazy. What are we doing at Gen Con? Game signups is soon. You know, Mighty Dave, I have kind of given up on signing up for events at Gen Con because it's so crazy and wild, and I almost always regret signing up for anything, because the moment I sign up for something, I start going like, I'm doing this other thing. I don't want to have to go. You know, that's one of the reasons I really started doing a lot of indie games on demand, because it's just like pick up and play. But I do need to look at the event catalog, and I haven't looked at it yet. But also, if there's going to be a lot of, Knights of the Last Call patrons there, or Knights of the Last Call viewers or subscribers, then, maybe we can have some hang-ups and meetups of our own and maybe play some games. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Gen Con for me isn't just about role-playing games. It's about board games and card games. I used to play a lot of Magic, the Gathering, at Gen Con. So for me, it's just like it's all the gaming things all at once. Yeah. The 13th Age book is so janky and unprofessional in the best possible way. I love it. Yeah, exactly. Yes. And I agree that the commentary shows you like, look, you are in charge here. We change things all the time. Why don't you? It's like when people watch Jason Bullman play Pathfinder 2 and he changes the rules and doesn't follow them all the time, and he doesn't use a grid or a miniature. Mark Seifter does the same thing and changes the rules up and uses different things like, no, these rules are the most important thing ever. It's like, okay, well, the game designers don't use them. So what is that telling you? 13th Age monsters are beautiful. They are the most simplest monster blocks ever, and yet still just chock full of a lot of fun and cool stuff. Not to mention, deadlier specials, which make them even more fun. So, all right. Well, that's going to bring us to 9:30. We did get a super chat there from London, so technically we are at our goal of $100. So thank you everybody for hanging out. Thank you everybody for donating, and thank you for being a part of our community. Certainly look forward to it. Oh, last thing I want to talk about. I'll probably do a poll, and I'll probably talk to my patrons, but you all are here. Pathfinder 2 is an important part of our channel. And I mean, hell, we just started running Abomination Vaults again. Given everything that we probably all are patrons here. That is probably true, Sean. Here's the thing. We want to be able to show more Pathfinder 2 content on this channel, but I don't want to get stuck doing 27 set episodes, 4 hours each, of all blank ranked, right? So what are some of the and there's other things that other channels do and have done that are, quite frankly, very good. Like, there's no point for us to go through every rule of the game, right? How it's played has already done that. So what are the things that we could do, that the Knights could do, either me individually or me with Aaron or Bob, or maybe me with some of our hero tier patrons, that we could bring to Pathfinder 2 content that would be compelling and interesting and valuable to our community? Because while so many people in our community really do love, these new indie games and all this other stuff, the fact of the matter is a lot of our community still plays Pathfinder 2 regularly. They still like Pathfinder 2. And a lot of our wider community is very Pathfinder 2 focused. And again, we just restarted playing Abomination Vaults because we're like, Pathfinder 2 is a great game. So, we don't want to just abandon it. But I also don't want to do a 60 session AP. actual play, right? I don't want to do a 20 level adventure path. I don't even know if I want to do a 10 level adventure path. And I definitely don't think I want to take, I don't know, all feats ranked, right? Or all magical items ranked, or all weapons ranked, because it's just like, that just feels, at this point, feels pretty derivative. But sometime this month, May, I should say next month, I want to start some sort of Pathfinder 2 related series that we can put out at least a couple episodes a month. And so, yeah, I'd be curious to know what you think. So if you got this far, leave a comment in below, or head over to KOLC chat, content chat, if you're a patron. And if you want to be part of these concepts, you know, feel free to join the Patreon. We are a fun bunch. We look forward to having you over there. Our Northern Reaches Season 2 campaign is starting to get signups underway. Right now, it's only for our veteran players, people who have played last year. But once we get that group, that block signed up, it's sort of a thank you for being a part of our community last year. We're then going to do the next wave, which is going to be new players. And so, you know, definitely stay tuned, stay listened. If you want to join in May, you know, that way you can kind of be up to date and get in. Northern Reach is going to be a really fun experience. And it's a really unique and interesting way to play Pathfinder 2. We've got a lot of changes in house rules this year that'll make it even more interesting. So I think it'll be really, really cool to be participant in that. Sean says, maybe ways to integrate other game ideas into your Pathfinder 2 games, like clocks and fronts. That's not a bad idea. I like that idea. Very short. I'd like to see you do a Let's Play, however many levels it is, with a side series behind the scenes of you showing how you prepped and campaign designed. That's also pretty cool. I agree. That's also kind of very neat. KC says, very short APs, or do retros with the group on learnings, what they liked. Yeah. Okay. So I think a lot of people like this idea of the behind the scenes stuff. Some random guy says, I am a huge fan of homebrew. All right. I think general advice with some eye towards Pathfinder 2e would be good, but you already do that, and I'm not sure how many outsiders really see that as Pathfinder content. Yeah, Frostjack, I mean, that is part of the problem, right? Like, for a lot of people, Pathfinder content is Pathfinder content. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I mean, we've definitely done streams like in Night School about building monsters, and building them into Pathfinder 2 and trying to, make them more interesting and increasing. I think we could do more stuff like that for sure. Yeah, I don't want to beat a dead horse. I don't want to just keep going back and being like, oh, we just do more all things ranked. It's like, yeah, that's okay. At a certain point, the diminishing return, right? It becomes like a splat book, right? Like, we don't need all this. But I also don't want to just sit there and do like, because here's the problem. The problem is, you all are fairly advanced players. And so like, me doing like here's how Pathfinder 2 works. I could do that video, right? But like, I don't know that benefits you, my patron, or my loyal viewer a lot, because you probably already know all that stuff. I mean, some of you out there are better at Pathfinder 2 than me. Class deep dives are something that I have thought about doing as well, Mighty Dave. Just taking, maybe it's a live stream, but maybe it's just a video where I just take one class and I kind of go into it. I talk about the subclass. This is actually an idea that Quark had, which is just, going into the subclasses, talking about different ways that the class can work and function and, be part of an RPG party. And I think that would be kind of interesting as well. All the important things have already been ranked. Yeah. Yeah, the problem with character builds, Sean, is I personally hate character builds. That's part of the problem. I mean, if somebody else on my channel wanted to do those, they could do them. I just personally don't find them interesting. I think being like, oh, and then you can take this feat and then this feat, and then at level 16, your character finally comes online with this feat. That's just not the way I think about RPG games. Eric talking about categorizing the monsters via like a la 4th edition. I like that. Yeah, Eric, I think that's something that Pathfinder 2 desperately needs anyways. So that is a really good idea as well. All right. Well, leave some comments below. Head over to KLC content chat if you're a member of the Patreon, and you should be. Patreon.com/nightsoflastcall. If you don't want to give us any money, which is fine, but you could at least use our Drive-Thru-RPG link if you're buying stuff off of Drive-Thru-RPG. That link is in the description below. We get a couple percent back of anything you buy. It doesn't cost you any more money, but Drive-Thru RPG just says, hey, thanks for sending the business our way. So if you're going to use Drive-Thru RPG, maybe consider using the Knights of Last Call's affiliate link. We'd appreciate it. So, yeah. Well, that is going to wrap it up for me tonight. I'm going to be back Thursday, where I don't know what we're doing. So I'll probably talk to my patrons and see what they want to talk about. So, all right, everybody. I will see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Peace.